Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today as we're going to be going over one of our predictions. We got it wrong. That's right. We were wrong in one of our predictions, and we're going to speak with you about why we got it wrong and how we got it wrong. And what does this mean to you? Now, first of all, if this is the first time that you're seeing the program, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, talking to you about all the issues that matter. No matter where you are in the world, you can reach us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, social media, and be able to call into the show as well as leave us your text and chats about what matters to you, because we believe in the First Amendment and your free speech. So we invite you and hope that you will join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, to the issue at hand today, we've been talking about the 2020 census for many years. In fact, both publicly and privately, we've been speaking about this since about 2016. And we have been stating that for all of those years, that we expect New York State to lose approximately 1.8 million people, roughly 2 members of Congress, 2 of the seats in the House of Representatives. And it's something that we had stood by and said often and over again. And this would have major implications, besides the fact that it would continue the downturn in the New York State in terms of its political power, going from a high in 1953 of 45 seats to what would be 25 seats if we had been correct, and also meaning that there would be a shift in the districts in New York State, potentially meaning that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is unloved by the Democratic Party in New York, may lose her seat, as well as a Republican, probably the New York 22nd District being removed from its current state and redistricted. Now, this is a big deal, because when the census comes out, every state gets redistricted. And very often, this is a very partisan matter. It's something that is controlled by the state legislatures and the political party in charge at that time. And it determines how likely it is for any elected official to be reelected based on their party affiliation. In New York, it is highly partisan and is known for its gerrymandering. Gerrymandering being that one party sets up a district so that it is almost impossible for the incumbent or that party's affiliation to lose any elections for the next 10 years. It's a very negative aspect of the political process that is based entirely on the population in that state and in various counties and cities. So it's a big deal. It makes a big difference. It affects who's going to be elected and what kind of laws will be passed in your home, whether it's a city, a state, or anything in between. So let's get to it. In 2016, 2017, 18, 19, 20, we said that New York State would lose roughly 1.8 million seats. Each seat in the New York State, in the federal House of Representatives, the Congress, is roughly 720,000 people. So we were pretty sure of that. In fact, we were wrong, as we mentioned. And in fact, what we see is, as we see reported by the New York New York Post earlier today at about 4 o'clock, New York State is going to lose 1 congressional seat because of the new census data. In fact, the story goes on to say that New York almost kept the seat that it has, kept itself at 27 seats, and had missed that window by exactly 89 residents. Just 89 people. Key word here, and something that's very important, 89 residents is the key word. And it's highlighted by the New York Post, but most people will miss this. 89 residents. I want to emphasize that because we're not talking about 89 citizens. These aren't 89 Americans. These are 89 people who happen to be in the state of New York. And that means, and I am alluding to, and I will say it, that means illegal aliens. Or as the Democrats would like to say, undocumented citizens or undocumented immigrants or undocumented workers. It's all the same thing. These are illegal aliens, individuals who have broken the United States law, have entered the country without any authorization. Those are the documents they miss. They are illegally in the United States. And that makes all the difference. It is a big deal. Now, as we see from the New York Post, not only did New York State not decrease by the 2 congressional seats, New York State actually grew its population by 4%. New York State now has 20.2 million individuals living in the state, which is up from 19.4 million in 2010. This is a big deal. This makes an immense difference. And I'm about to show you why and how. But why is this important? Well, we see that New York is one of 7 states that have lost a seat in the Congress. That includes California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. There are 5 states that will be gaining a seat. That is Colorado, Florida, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon, and of course, Texas gained 2 seats. Now, this is a big deal because if we're looking at each and every one of the states going from 1972 to 2020, what we will tend to see is, based on this arrangement, you will see that overall in presidential elections, most recently, we're looking at Democrats, based on the new census data, will be losing seats in Pennsylvania, Michigan, California, and Illinois. That's 4 less electoral votes. That's 4 seats, and weakening their position in the next election cycle. So Democrats are down 5 if you're including New York State. If you look at the number of states that are gained by Democrats, they gained Colorado and Oregon. That's +2. Then looking at Florida, looking at the Republican gains, that's Florida, Missouri, North Carolina, and Texas with 2. This makes a big difference on who's going to be in Congress, how many seats are going to be able to shift in the 2022 midterm elections, and who is therefore going to be able to make laws in this nation, like the red flag laws, like packing the court on the Supreme Court, and other laws that will affect millions of people. So this is a very important deal, and politicians and the political parties are looking at this intently. If New York State had in fact lost 2 seats, well, then we're looking at the Democrats only having a net gain of 1 seat in Congress, and that has an impact. In fact, I believe that the impact is far, far more than what we're speaking about. Let me get into this a little bit for you. So, let's understand, and I want to be clear, in 2016, 2017, 2018, we were talking about New York State losing seats. We were absolutely sure New York State would lose 2 seats. How could we say that? Where did we get that idea from? Well, quite simply, it's because we were paying attention to the news media. You know, institutions like CNN in February 21st of 2020 saying, lots of people moved out of New York and California in 2020. Here's where they went. In fact, they were talking about Atlas Van Lines and U-Haul, showing that people chose to leave New York and California the most in 2020. And they mentioned that New York and California had a much higher outbound activity, according to Atlas Van Lines, and it could be the cost of living, taxes, or the political climate, perhaps. I would venture to say a combination of all of those reasons are the reason for the exodus out of New York and also California. In fact, if we go back to December 5th of 2020, Bloomberg News was mentioning that even before COVID, 2,600 people a week were leaving New York City. The exodus had already happened. New York City was losing 376 residents per day to domestic migration, leaving from one state and going to another, an increase of more than 100 people per day from the previous year, 2018, before it became the epicenter of the country's virus outbreak in March of 2020, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's latest survey on the shifts. New York was losing people massively. Los Angeles was losing 260 people massively. Illinois was losing 164 people massively. Now you may say to yourself, well, Mike, why does that make a difference? Illinois is very simply, Illinois, that's a Democratic stronghold. New York, a Democratic stronghold. California, a Democratic stronghold. That changes everything. That changes Congress. That changes the laws that get passed. Whether or not we get to see the tax and spend policies of Democrats continue or end. There is a big difference, and it affects your pocket economically, your taxes. It affects the businesses that can and cannot grow in this nation. This affects whether the Supreme Court is packed or not. It determines whether or not statehood would be in Washington, D.C., further stacking the Senate in the same way that Democrats would like to pack and stack the House of Representatives. And this isn't the end of it, though, because it's just not 2 years. In 2019, according to Forbes magazine, New Yorkers are leaving the city in droves. Why they're moving and where they're going. And they mentioned, according to Bloomberg, almost 300 people are moving out per day in 2019. Now, and it's not just there, because they also highlight that in Los Angeles, which is California, Chicago, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Connecticut, New Haven, and Hartford and New Haven in Connecticut, in these Democratic strongholds, including New Jersey and Connecticut and New York, we're seeing people leave from the Democratic strongholds. People are abandoning those states to go to other states. It gets even further. Going back to December of 2018, talking about the change from July of 2017 to 2018. This is coming from WRGB Channel 6 in New York State. The answer is that we saw population drop again in 2017 to 18, and New York State leading the states. Again, this is a historical trend. In fact, if we were to look at the chart of it, we see that from 1900 to 2020, most importantly, looking at the chart from 2011 to the projection for 2022, what we're seeing is New York State peaked at about 2015. And from that point going forward, and actually it had stagnated from 2014 through 2016, but New York State has been losing population, consistently losing population. And in particular, we're talking about the overall population. That includes illegal aliens and, more importantly, United States citizens. And again, we want to make it clear that the last time New York State was gaining was about 1953, when New York State had 45 seats in Congress, a massive and powerful number that allowed New York State to control many of the laws that were passed in this nation. And for much of that time, in a Democratic shift. And we see that this has been decreasing every decade. The loss of power for the New York State has been significant. New York has been losing. We already lost 2 seats in 2010. We were targeting another 2 in 2020. So we have to say to ourselves, why is this happening? How could this be happening? What does this mean? Well, we want to understand that this, and this may sound like a conspiracy theory to you, but we believe this is correct. And we believe that this is reasonable. Again, it's somewhat of conjecture, but putting all the pieces together. We know that New York State is one of the bluest of blue states, and New York State helped to cause Joe Biden to get the Biden administration going forward. And that was a key point. The support in New York State by its members of Congress for the Biden administration and for the executive orders of the Biden administration for the infrastructure bill and the COVID relief is something that needed to be rewarded. In fact, it needed to shore up New York State along with California and make sure that its stronghold was secure for the 2022 midterm elections. And as a result, we saw in Joe Biden's infrastructure deal that we spoke about previously, New York State had its $12 billion loss, a loss totaled up from Governor Cuomo. Governor Andrew Cuomo's economic policies were so devastating to New York. New York was $12 billion in the hole, $8 billion in the hole prior to the COVID crisis. We were bleeding money. And so the Biden administration, to reward the Democrats in New York State, gave $12 billion to New York State to make up for its entire loss. New York State, for its measure, decided to use that money and to go an additional $2 billion in debt so that they could give $15,600 to illegal aliens. Yes, they're noted as undocumented immigrants. Again, the documentation they miss is any legal authorization to be in the United States. These are illegal aliens. These are criminals who are actively avoiding the law. So New York State is to give $15,600 to illegal aliens for their COVID relief. At least 300,000 of them. That's a big number. At least 300,000 people. Now remember, New York State kept its seat and might have kept both seats if that number had been 300,089. That's how close it came. Now you may say to me, well, Mike, how do you know that this is all because of illegal aliens? And it's a very good question. Why am I saying that the illegal aliens made the difference? And alluding to the thought that New York State is now paying off those illegal aliens for being in New York State to the tune of $15,600. Well, I get that because if we look at the reality of what happened here, if you may recall, and most people will not because it was barely mentioned in the news, but on January 20th, the first day that the Biden administration had control of the United States government, there was an executive order, one of many that day, that said it was for ensuring a lawful and accurate enumeration and apportionment pursuant to the decennial census. It's a very nice way of saying we're going to count illegal aliens. That's what this says. And to be even more clear about that, we see that it states under Section 4, Data Quality, the Secretary shall make all necessary steps consistent with law to ensure that the total population, keyword, total population, information presented to the President and to the states is accurate and complies with all applicable laws. The key word here is total population. That means illegal immigrants as well as American citizens. And this is a reversal of the orders that came from the Trump administration, as seen in Section 5. Executive Order 13880 and also the Presidential Memorandum of July 21st, 2020 are hereby revoked. Under the Trump administration, illegal aliens would not be counted, which would severely impact the population numbers for California, for Illinois, and for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. 5 massive massive, bluer than blue Democratic strongholds. This was done to reverse that. So I want to be very clear. This is why we are seeing the difference. We saw that the Biden administration, in reward to the bluest of blue states for their support, they bailed out these states, New York, California, and many others, with your tax money. That tax money is now being used to pay off the illegal aliens that have broken the law to come into your state. And that is the number that propped up the Democratic Party to give them a chance to fight in the 2022 midterm elections. Now you may say, Mike, well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, the numbers balanced out. There's as many people in New York as not in New York. Well, let me give you another hint, another way I'm looking at this. This is from Reuters News in December 15th of 2020. Fleeing New Yorkers resulted in an estimated $34 billion in lost income. New York State has been bleeding money year after year under the Cuomo administration, the single-party rule of New York State for the last 2 years. And we see that, all told, a net 70,000 people left the metropolitan area this year, resulting in roughly $34 billion in lost income, according to Unicast. About 3.5 million people left New York City between January 1st and December 7th in 2020. Some 3.5 million people earning lower average incomes moved into the city during that same time period. Now, I would allege to you that the people who moved in were mostly illegal aliens, that they were propping up this New York State number. And this is something that is consistent with census data, we believe, although the census was not allowed to be able to determine whether a person was an illegal alien or an American citizen. Those numbers were not counted. That distinction was not allowed by law under the Biden administration to be made. But we do know that New York State has been working towards this for a long time. In fact, if we're looking at the Forbes magazine article from February of 2020, New York State was targeted by the Department of Homeland Security for its sanctuary state status. That's right, a safe hold, a safe space for illegal aliens. In fact, they mentioned that New York passed a law late last year permitting illegal aliens to apply for a driver's license and shielding state driver's license records from ICE and U.S. Customs and Borders Patrol, whose job it is to remove illegal aliens from this nation to punish people who have broken the law. In addition, and something that wasn't mentioned in this article, is the fact that in getting those driver's licenses, illegal aliens need only check a box, and they would then be able to vote in elections, which was a strong concern, a big concern for many people looking to protect voter integrity and to make sure that voter preferences were not nullified by the illegal alien preference. Now, I would ask you, and I pose to you, if we know for a fact, and we do know for a fact, that illegal aliens are receiving $15,600 apiece to be in New York State, and that we have an open border policy under the Biden administration, which Biden himself has stated is an open border, a crisis in America, with over 172,000 people just since he has been in the first 2 months of his being in office, having entered the nation, possibly 1.1 million projected to be entering the nation. And when they come to New York, they are being rewarded with driver's licenses, and they are being rewarded with paychecks, $15,000 paychecks. Let me ask you, does that seem like New York State is paying for its congressional record, its congressional power. That New York State is re-engineering its ability to maintain a Democratic control in the House in 2022. Is this fair? We tend to believe not. We tend to believe that were it not for at least 300,000, if not more, members of the illegal immigrant population, New York State would have fallen at least to 1.2, if not 1.8 million lost population. In fact, according to all news media reports, up to this date and even throughout the year of 2020, New York State was bleeding population, left and right. New York State currently has fewer people in many states, in many cities and towns. Businesses have closed up, people have moved away, and many of them are going to Florida. And if you don't believe it, just ask people in New York State and New York City how many people are around them. How many apartments are empty? How many homes are up for sale? How many businesses have closed forever? It's simple, and do the math. The only way that New York State seems to be capable of countering this consistent trend and bleeding loss of both economy and population seems to only be possible by counting illegal aliens. Something that the Biden administration was absolutely certain to do first and foremost through their executive order to make sure that they were able to protect all of their supporters, all of their allies, their Democratic Party, not necessarily the public. So we have to ask you, and we will say, we were wrong. Our prediction failed. New York State only lost one member of Congress, and nowhere near the number that we had expected to see as a loss. Now, do you believe that the counting illegal aliens is why New York State only lost one representative? Is it because of the illegal aliens that New York State is able to maintain as much power as it has, and that looking at 2022, it will help to enable the Democratic Party to maintain its control over Congress, to enable things like D.C. becoming the 51st state, to enable packing of courts, to enable red flag laws that will separate families and take away people's Second, Fourth, Fifth, 10th, 14th Amendment rights? Or do you think we've gotten it wrong? Did we misunderstand? Does it not make sense? Does it look like the Democratic Party, via Joe Biden in the White House on the first day, went about making sure that they could reward the Democratic Party and illegal aliens for supporting them, and that possibly some of those individuals who received driver's licenses may have made sure that Democrats were able to maintain their control? Do you think that's a conspiracy theory? That this is just a mad imagining of a conservative political commentator? I want to hear your thoughts. Please do leave your comments. And if you found this to be interesting, informative, please like and share. And most of all, do subscribe so that our voice, your voice, can be heard every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. from around the world. And we hope that you will be well.